Hello, welcome to AP Daily. My name is Dan Bonarigo, and I teach at Riverside Brookfield High School in Riverside, Illinois, just outside of Chicago. All right, this video is on topic 1.2, program function and purpose. In this video, we'll learn that computer programs take inputs in a variety of fashions to influence the program's behavior. All right, so let's look at specifically what we're going to learn in this video. So there are two learning objectives. We're going to identify inputs to a program and identify outputs produced by a program. And these are the essential knowledge that you should gain from this video. Program inputs are data sent to a computer for processing by a program. An event is associated with an action and supplies input data to a program. Events can be generated in a variety of ways. Inputs usually affect the output produced by a program. In event-driven programming, program statements are executed when triggered rather than through sequential flow control. Input can come from a user or other programs. Program outputs are data sent from a program to a device. Program output can come from in a variety of forms. And then program output is usually based on the program's input or prior state. All right, so let's look at some examples. So identifying inputs to programs. So computer programs accept input in a variety of different forms. Tactile, or also known as touch, audio, visual, text, including numerical values. All right, and so we want to think about all of these different types of inputs. How does a computer program take input from touch, or audio or visual or text? And so this is what we want to understand. So what types of input do your devices accept? So if we think about the different devices that you have, it might help you to understand how computer programs take in this input. All right, so let's take the first one, your smartphone or your tablet. All right, so this is one where smartphones, tablets, they all seem to have a touch screen, right? And so now we get into thinking about, okay, so now touch is taking, is sending input into my device. So where I touch on the screen or how I touch on the screen, right? So it could be, do you press hard? Do you press softly? Do you swipe? Right? Depending on where you start to swipe and where you end to swipe, different types of inputs that your devices are going to accept. All right. What about other things on your smartphone or tablet, right? There are buttons, aren't there? There are things, buttons on the side, power button, volume button, physical buttons. Sometimes there's buttons on the back of the device. All of those are going to be different types of input. All right. What about audio or visual, right? Can you say things that make your smartphone or tablet do things? All right. Can your smartphone or tablet do things based on what it sees? All right. You think about some phones have facial recognition software, right? So you hold your phone up to your face and it sees you and it can determine that you, if it's your phone, are the correct person, and then it unlocks the phone, right? So this is visual input, right? That is making your phone do something, right? Text, sometimes you have to type in like a passcode or something like that. And yes, you're doing that via touch, but it depends on which characters you're actually pressing, right? So now we're thinking about text as input, right? Your laptop, computer, right? What types of inputs does that take? Well, now you're thinking about, okay, now I have a mouse or I have a trackpad that you can click. I have a keyboard, right? So now we're thinking about all of these different things. What about like a gaming console? Right? I know this is one that a lot of people don't think of. Is that a computer? Well, yeah, absolutely, it's a computer. But now I have a remote control, right? And there's all these different buttons, and this is allowing me to send input into my device. All right. So how do the programs actually receive the input? Well, most programs are written in an event-driven environment, right? So what does that mean? Well, events are triggered by some action, right? Which usually sends input into the program, right? So if I do some sort of an action, if I click in a certain place, if I press on a certain, place on my, my phone screen, or if on like a gaming console, if I click a certain button on the remote, these are going to trigger actions into the program, right? So what types of events can users trigger? Well, a mouse click, screen taps, swipes, or like force touch, right? If you press really hard on, like a smartphone screen, maybe something different happens. Or like I said, if you swipe, right, rather than just press in a particular spot, these all can trigger different types of events. All right. Physical button clicks, right? I mean, your phone has buttons on the side or on the back, right, that do different things, right? Um, Keyboard entries, right? So if you type certain things or you hold certain keys that are, different keys together, different things happen on your computer or laptop. An audio trigger, right? You think about like a keyword or phrase, right? When you have like a smart device, right? If you say a certain word or phrase, it makes this, your device do something, right? And so I think that that's, really important to think about all of these different events that a user can trigger. All right. So what does input accomplish in a program? Well, input usually affects the output, right? So when we say usually, right, you click in a certain place, you press on a certain part of the screen, you say something, right? It usually affects the output. But why wouldn't it? Well, let's say your phone screen is not turned on, right? If you press on the screen, nothing happens, right? It's the same action, right? It's the same input that you were supplying, but nothing happened, right? Because you actually have to have the screen on in order for that input to actually do anything. Or what about like with a smart device, right? If you say, um, you know, search the internet for this, right? Nothing happens because you didn't use that keyword or phrase to wake up the device, right? And so input usually affects the output, but not always, unless you're not following the correct sequence of things that you need to do in order to trigger that output. All right. What outputs are produced by a device? Well, visual, audio, tactile, things that you can touch or feel, right? Text. All right. So when we think about this, okay, what sort of output do your devices supply? All right, so let's think about your smartphone or tablet, right? Obviously visual, right? When you do certain things, the screen changes, right? You can see things on your screen based upon the things that you have pressed or the things that you have said or, whatever, okay? Audio, you can hear certain things, right? Think about your smart, speaker. If you say your keyword, your smart speaker is going to say, well, what do you want me to do? Or maybe if you say something that the speaker is confused by, it'll say like, I don't understand how to do that, or whatever, right? But those are things that you can hear, right? Tactile, touch, feel. What does that mean? Well, if I press in a certain place, maybe my phone vibrates, right? Or something like that. These are things that I can feel. All right. Text, well, sometimes it just displays some text that might tell me something that I need to do or indicate there's an error or something like that. All right. What about your laptop? Well, obviously it's got the visual, right? You can see because it has a display, it has a screen. All right. What else can it give me? Well, it can give me audio. A lot of laptops don't really have like a vibrate feature, but certainly there are other devices that have that touch or feel. Text, obviously, your laptop can display things to you. Gaming console, right? This is one that I was thinking of. Like, this is definitely something that has a tactile output, right? When you're playing a certain game and something happens, you fall down or whatever, your remote vibrates, right? Or it's something that you can actually feel when you're interacting, right? So these are all things that produce different output that we want to be mindful of. Right, so how does a program know what to do upon an event? Well, an action triggers an event. So an action may be initiated by the user, right? Like something you touched or said or clicked or whatever, right? or another program or device, right? So you might have a device that is connected, and something that that device does or sees initiates this, right? So let's say like you have a smart doorbell, right? And somebody comes to the door and it rings, but you're not home, right? So that might trigger an event on your phone to tell you, hey, there's somebody at your door, right? And then you can view that person or you can interact with that person, right? Now, the program jumps to the code segment according to the event, right? So if you have, a program that is written, right, there might be, hundreds or thousands of lines of code. They don't all have to be executed in the order that they're written, right? Event-driven programming, right, takes an event and it says, okay, now go to this line and execute this line of code based upon the event, right? So when it jumps to that, it executes that code segment, right? And then the output is triggered by the code segment, right? Or additional events are triggered, right? So, this code segment says, hey, go do this. Then the program goes to a new spot, and then another spot, and another spot. And then finally the output comes out and you see something on the screen, or you hear something, or you feel something, right? So it's important to remember that the program code is not necessarily executed in order, right? Code segments are executed as they are called, right, according to the events triggered, right? So it's important that we understand that just because the lines are written, number one, number two, number three, number four, they don't necessarily get executed in that order. They're executed based upon what the programming language tells it to do. All right. So what are the things that we should understand as a result of this video? Well, we should be able to identify inputs to a program, and we should be able to identify outputs produced by a program. And hopefully we understand these essential knowledge statements, right? That program inputs are data sent to a computer for processing by